Today on Bench Briefs, we're looking at a recent decision from the Supreme Court of Canada that dives deep into the delicate balance of power between the federal government and the provinces. The case is Quebec, Attorney General v. Kanyinda, decided in March 2026, and it raises important questions about how far the federal government can go when its laws touch on areas traditionally controlled by the provinces. Here's what happened. The federal government passed a new law that affected an area usually regulated by Quebec. The Attorney General of Quebec challenged this law, arguing that it overstepped federal authority and infringed on Quebec's constitutional powers. This dispute brought the court back to the division of powers laid out in the Constitution Act of 1867, which sets out what the federal government and the provinces can each legislate on. At the heart of the case was a classic federalism question. Does the federal statute intrude on Quebec's exclusive right to legislate in certain areas? Quebec said yes, claiming the federal law was unconstitutional because it encroached on provincial jurisdiction. The federal government, on the other hand, argued that its legislation was valid and within its constitutional authority. To understand why this is such a big deal, it helps to remember that Canada's constitution divides powers between two levels of government to keep a balance. Provinces have exclusive control over things like property and civil rights, education, and healthcare, while the federal government handles things like criminal law and national defense. But sometimes federal laws touch on provincial matters, and that's when courts have to step in to decide if the federal government has gone too far. In Quebec, Attorney General v. Kanyinda, the Supreme Court had to carefully analyze the federal law's purpose and effects to see if it was really about a federal matter or if it was an improper intrusion into provincial territory. The justices looked at whether the law's main goal was something the federal government could validly legislate on, or if it was really about regulating an area reserved for Quebec. The court's decision reaffirmed the importance of respecting the division of powers and the principle of federalism. It recognized that while the federal government has broad powers, those powers aren't unlimited. If a federal law crosses the line and interferes too much with provincial jurisdiction, it can't stand. This case is significant because it clarifies how far the federal government can go when its laws impact provincial areas. It also highlights the ongoing negotiation between federal and provincial governments in Canada's constitutional framework. For provinces like Quebec, which have a strong sense of jurisdictional identity, decisions like this help protect their ability to govern important aspects of daily life for their residents. In the bigger picture, Quebec, Attorney General v. Kanyinda, reminds us that federalism is a living, breathing part of Canadian law. It requires constant attention and balance to ensure that both levels of government can work effectively without stepping on each other's toes. This case adds an important chapter to that story by reinforcing the limits on federal power and upholding provincial autonomy. Thanks for listening to Bench Briefs. Join us next time for another episode where we unpack key legal decisions shaping Canada's legal landscape.